particular convention to say, look, how many of you would believe that Christ is God? How many of you here believe that Christ is God? Pick up your hands. We've got 1, 2, 3. How many of you do not believe that Christ is God? All of you here. So basically this is what they did. He says, how many of you accept Christ as God? The majority put up their hands. And because the majority put up their hands, that basic idea became part and parcel of Christian belief. That's when you had this codification taking place. So that's how it took place, by means of a vote. Vote people in power. So those who won the vote were known as the followers of Athanasius, simplistically speaking. Those who rejected the vote were known as the followers of Arius. And what happened to them? Thrown in the Circus Maximus, persecuted. In one particular case, there was this individual, I forget her name, a follower of Arius, placed in boiling water, and the skin became nice and soft, and then subsequently hung upside down and skinned alive, and then given to the dogs to eat up. But they were tortured because they voted, they took the wrong vote. Some people who knew that they were going to be tortured just picked up their hands to say, look, we accept this. And that's how you find Christianity as we understand it today at the council at this particular church council that took place. There were obviously other councils, like the first council of Constantinople, council of Ephesus in 431, 451, 553, 680, and the second council of Nicaea in 787. See, people just think about the first, but there were many councils, and they all had different aspects of theology that they developed. So when you develop your idea, you develop your faith, it becomes far more codified and far more accepted. That became what we now know as Roman Catholic Church. It was only afterwards in the 1600s, 1400s, or with the advent of Martin Luther, that you have the Reformation and the Protestants developing, where they protested away from the existing Catholic Church. So that's what happened, and that's what took place. Today's Sunday, it comes from the Roman Son Dies. What's the beginning or the birthday or the commencement of the day of the sun, worship of the sun? The 25th of December, we celebrate Christmas. That was the adopted birth of the sun god. The cross of light becomes the emblem of Christianity. The declaration that Jesus is God is declared by a vote. And so that's what you have, in a sense, where this became the foundational creed. The creed of Christ developing and metamorphosing to its form that we see today. So what do we do? I'm saying go back to your faith. Does the Bible teach this? I mean, does the teachings of Jesus, do they speak about this in New Testament? We have one example of Theodosius after the year 380. The Pauline Church was called the Catholic Church, and the Arians were called the heretics. 15 laws were issued against the Arians, legislating different punishments from jail to execution. 7,000 were killed in one massacre in Salonika. And here they were, tortured, put to the sword. Where was this? This is in a circus. You see, you go to the Boswell Wilkie circus, you have lions basically playing tricks against each other. Back then there were these animals playing tricks against human beings, seeing which human would be the most susceptible to being eaten alive. Sometimes the lion never liked its meal. It disagrees with its meal, so it vomits the meal out. But these were Christians, early Christians. You could call them Muslims because they were Arians. They were followers of Arius. Another example, Christians being tortured. Christians being hurt, being murdered, brutally killed. So those who never accepted a view were tortured. Those who accepted a view, which became the mainstream view, entered into part of what was later becoming canonical, established. So establishing a belief by bloodshed doesn't necessarily make that belief authentic. And there were beliefs that came up. I mean, about God, for example. People like Baruch Spinoza, a 16th century Jewish philosopher, asked, he says, what do you mean when you say God came down to earth as a man? Do you mean that he gave up some of his godly powers, which means that he no longer was God anymore and became a man, but somehow or the other he could assume godly power by again becoming God, which means that there are two gods? I mean, if you take a ball of clay and you change the corners and you basically make it into a square, it no longer becomes a ball of clay. It's a different object itself. So if God were to become a man, what happens? Does he have the same kind of physical attributes of man? Does he have hunger, thirst? Does he have the sexual desires? Does he need to go and relieve himself? Is he part man, part God? Simply man, simply God, or both? What's your understanding? Legend becomes reality. In the pagan Christ, we've got here the legendary stories of man-God saviors dying for the sins of their people were very common in history. The divine teacher is called, tested by the adversary, gathers disciples, heals the sick, preaches the good news, finally runs afoul of his bitter enemies, suffers, dies, and is resurrected after 3 days. That's a pattern of the sun god in ancient dramas. All of them believed the same. Here you've got a picture in Egypt. And what are they wearing on their chest? They've got the cross on the chest. Look at those two chaps in the front and the guy in the back. He's got like a tie shaped like that of a cross. Now, that's something which was incorporated into Roman Catholicism at a later point in time. As many people would tell you it's not necessary to do this. And the cross, as I stated, it's a pagan symbol that was adored in Egypt thousands of years before Jesus was born. And the Catholic Church only adopted it 600 years after Christ. Therefore, you find, for example, the witnesses will tell you that Jesus was not on a cross, he was on a stake, like this here. Because they say the cross resembles a phallus. It's phallic worship. Like the lingam worship or the phallic worship. But little do they realize that the totem pole, the pole or the stake, is also symbolic of the totem pole. The totem pole is also, if you look at ancient mythology, is also a symbol of the phallus. So even though they criticize the cross and they say that the cross is phallic worship, the totem pole or the stake is also phallic worship. The reproductive, you worshipping or you commemorating the reproductive creative force of humankind. You worship that. Symbolically you say that's the life force of human beings, so you worship that. This is another picture of an image of an individual crucified. Where was this taken? This was taken in one of the Sumerian tablets which they discovered. And you've got there on the top, interestingly enough, an image of the crescent and the star. And you've got the cross, person being crucified. Thousands of years before Jesus. Meaning it's mythological. Then you've got people who, I've discussed this before, have similar attributes or characteristics of Christ. Look at two people here. One is Dionysus, who's Bacchus. This chap here was known as a god of vineyard. He converted, one of the first miracles he did was he converted or changed water into wine. But look at his characteristics. Dionysus, born of the Virgin on the 25th of December and as a holy child was placed in a manger. Traveling teacher who performed miracles. He rode in a triumphal ass, on a procession on an ass, killed and eaten in a Eucharistic ritual for fecundity and purification. Rose from the dead on March the 25th. He was a god of wine and turned water into wine and considered only begotten Son, Savior, Redeemer, Alpha and Omega. Now look at these sun gods living thousands of years before Christ. Hundreds of years. So it begs the question, if you've got a story developing about Jesus, is it not possible that the person who developed these stories utilized these mythologies to come up with a specific idea about Christ? Not the Christ of history, but the Christ of mythology. Christ may be of belief. Bacchus, the god of wine, Roman god of wine, characteristics similar, identical to Jesus. Sol Invictus, a sun god, on a coin here, thousands of years before, similar characteristics of Jesus, was worshipped by Constantine, born on the 25th of December. He died and he rose on March the 25th. Worshipped as a son of God. What we have here, we've got here a list of virgin births. Babylonian goddess Semiramis and a God incarnate son. The Indian goddess Devka and the infant Krishna. Indian goddess Isi and infant Iswara. The goddess Diana of Ephesus. The Egyptian goddess Isis and the son Horus. The Roman Catholic Mary in the middle, bottom, and the God incarnate son Jesus. What's the similarity? All of them are born of virgins. If we believe that there was one virgin in history, then we have to believe that these were also virgin births. I mean, how do you explain it? Maybe it's possible Mary did in fact give birth to a virgin child, but then these stories before that, they were also virgin births. Look at Babylonian goddess Semiramis and the God incarnate son. The one right in the extreme left, also born of a virgin birth. It's like this, someone today gives birth to a child. What would you call that person? Someone special, someone gifted? Or maybe the fact that Christ was born of a virgin, does it make him now God incarnate or God in the flesh? Because that's one of the beliefs. Many Orthodox Muslims would tell you that, look, part of their belief is that they accept the virgin birth. Does it make him God? God in the flesh? What? And what do we have here? This is from one of the clay tablets which was found in the Babylonian epic of Gilgamesh. And there we've got the apple tree in the center, and we've got two people. And we've got on the extreme, that will be my right. Actually, it's my left from this side. But on the right, on your right, you'd have a serpent. Can you see the serpent there? You can see the serpent, and you can see the tree in the center, and you can see these two people sitting here. Who are they? Are they Adam and Eve? That's in the Babylonian epics of Gilgamesh. They're stories of the flood, which are also similar, thousands of years before the Old Testament was written. How do we explain these anomalies, Khalik? What do we do? Do we accept it as part of a development, or do we say, let's take a step back? Maybe what I have been told in history, or maybe what I have been told in belief, might not have been entirely accurate. My particular appeal to people from the Christian community, and certainly my appeal is to people from the Muslim community, don't get caught up by what people tell you. Think, reflect, ponder. That's what the Qur'an says. It says, will those who reject faith, will the unbelievers, the atheists and agnostics not see how the heavens and the earth were joined together as one unit of creation before we clove them asunder? Will the unbelievers not then see, or will those who have no faith not yet then see? Will those who have no faith not see how man was created from water? Will they then not believe? You see, when Jesus left this world, the historical Jesus, the Jesus we believe, he basically gave you a certain test. He told his disciples that I have yet many things to say unto you. Many means more than one. But you cannot bear them now. Meaning you haven't got the capacity. God had given Jesus to guide mankind till doomsday, but the people around him, they never had the capacity. So he says, I have yet many things to say unto you, but you cannot bear them now. Howbeit, when the Spirit of truth shall come, he will guide you unto all truth. For he shall not speak from himself, but what things ever shall he hear, that shall he speak, and he shall declare unto you the things that are to come. He shall glorify me. Now we in Islam say that that spirit of truth is the Prophet Muhammad. And you ask yourself, how is that possible? Well, Jesus uses the term spirit and prophet interchangeably. Go John, for example, in first epistle of John chapter 4 verse 1, he says, Beloved, believeth not every spirit, but try the spirits whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. In other words, a true spirit is a true prophet, and a false spirit is a false prophet. So how will you be able to know whether the spirit of God or the prophet of God is a true prophet of God? He says every spirit, meaning every prophet that confesses that Jesus is the Christ, is of God. Meaning a prophet is synonymous there for a spirit. The prophet that says that Jesus is a Messiah and was a true messenger of God, that prophet was of God. And you look around, which faith declares that? Our faith, Islam, the only non-Christian faith, makes that an article of faith for us to accept it. So my appeal to you is that don't accept anything that anyone, any religious leader, meaning both from the Muslim and the Christian side, tells you, unless he gives you proof and unless he gives you something to falsify it with. The Qur'an is filled with that. It tells you, you want to prove that this book is wrong? Find this, find a discrepancy in it. Do this, do that. Is anything in the Christian understanding of today, has Christianity ever said, look, you want to prove this is wrong? Here are the tests, this is what you do. When Einstein was propounding his theory of relativity, he said, this is my theory, you want to prove I'm wrong? This is it, X, Y, and Z, do this, it'll destroy me. There was an interesting example in the time of the Prophet where it made a great impact on the people of his time. He had an uncle called Abdul Uzza, otherwise known as Abu Lahab, the father of flame. And the story goes, and this was told by many people, that everything that the Prophet would say, Abu Lahab would basically counteract. The Prophet would give a talk, and then this man would go to the person and grab him by the shirt and say, what did Muhammad tell you? Whatever he said, it's a lie. He said black, it's white. He said morning, it's night. So he'd do the opposite. Now, it so happened that there was a chapter in the Quran which was called Surah Al-Lahab, which was revealed, and it basically says, what does it say? It says, Tabbat yada Abi Lahabyu Watab Ma aghna anhu Ma lahu ma kasab, and so on and so forth. It says, perish the father of flame, perish he. And it curses his wife to perdition. It destines him. It says, basically it says that this man will be destined to perdition, to eternal damnation, because of the type of person he was. Now it simply occurred to me that basically it was saying that, look, you Abu Lahab, you are never going to be a Muslim. You're never going to change. For 10 years, this particular chapter, this Quranic ayat or this Quranic verse was before him. It's saying, look, you are not going to change. All Abu Lahab had to say, well, look, I want to be a Muslim. I want to change now. What do you say about your book? Is your book correct? Your book is saying, I'm not going to be a Muslim. I'm going to be destined for hellfire. Well, I'm going to now change. I'm going to become a Muslim. All he could have said was that. And immediately, he would have destroyed the underbelly of Islam, because it would have proved that the Quran was false. Here you have for 10 years someone telling you, you're not going to change, you're going to be the same, you're never going to change your faith, you're going to be a pagan. And he does nothing about it. He accepts the status quo, because that's the kind of man that he was. So I'm saying that unless someone gives you proof, and unless he gives you something to falsify with, anything that he says is basically hot air. In this short discussion, I see there are one or two Christians that want to walk away. There will be an open question and answer session, a discussion. The aim of this program is not to challenge Christians. I'd very well stand in a masjid and I'd challenge Muslims on what Muslims believe. Many Muslims believe things that you've never heard of. They have many varied and funny ideas, funny belief systems. So it's not just Christians, Muslims too. So the aim of programs of this nature is to basically get a better understanding of where we come and where we are heading in society. We can only understand each other if we look at each other honestly and openly and with more clearer eyes. Then together we can join forces and then reshape Phoenix in the mold that we want to be, or reshape Chatsworth and reshape the greater Durban area in the line and in the particular methodology in terms of which our faith all our faiths can have a meaningful and holistic relevance to the communities that we find ourselves in. So with that, I close this program. I thank all of you for attending. I do understand there's going to be refreshments, but what we would like to do is that there are a few people in the audience here that might want to engage us, that might want to ask questions on issues intrinsic to their faith.
I just want to know something. All believe in God. God is one. Now, how do you know the real God? Who is the truth one? Did anybody see God?
Okay. Is that your question?
Did anybody see it? How God is, what form, and what kind it is. But we are of His image. God made us of His image. The Bible tells us. That's what we believe.
Okay. Is that your question?
Yes.
Well, there was an interesting anecdote that was basically where a teacher asked her students, he says, how many of you believe in God? And all the students picked up their hands. Then the teacher said, well, have you actually seen God? And the students say no. So if you haven't seen God, how do you know He exists? Have all of you seen Muhammad Khan? Yes, we have, so we know He exists. You haven't seen God, so how do you know whether He exists? So one bright spark says, well, pupils, have you seen the teacher's brain? And they say no. So he then asks, well, how do you know that the teacher's brain exists? So again, I think what we're doing here is we're basically quibbling. Look, there are substantial evidence for the existence of God. I mean, one of the main people that, one of the main kind of thesis or proofs that people have for the existence of God is the watchmaker theory. The issue of, if you find, for example, a watch in the wilderness or the forest, you would basically know that there is a maker behind that particular watch. The watch never came there just on its own particular line. Then basically you'd look at natural phenomena. Some point in time there needs to be a beginning. How does society develop? You see, the proponents of the Big Bang Theory or the proponents of Darwin's theory of evolution, if they believe evolution is correct or human evolution took place, which again is subjected to debate because there are many arguments against conventional Darwinism, but they would have to come to a conclusion that there was a point in time when there was a nothing. You accept that. So even if a scientist, an atheist, an agnostic believes that there is a development that took place. People were first the amoeba, then they developed into water, then they developed into apes, then there was a transitional link where they developed into human beings. There was a period, a process of development. But what happened when there was a nothing? How did the something come out of the nothing? Did it just appear? Because life itself couldn't have existed from time immemorial. There was a time when scientists